In short, I left PHM because currently PHM is no longer willing to continue embracing all the biblical principles that God has revealed.
PHM lost its mission and vision. It became a bureaucracy. I'm Andy Whitehurst. I worked for the nominal corporate SDA system for a little while, and I didn't last all that long, less than a year, because very quickly politics got in the way of spreading the gospel. And I place a higher importance on spreading the gospel than on politics or, having an income, a job. And so I quit there. And at this point, right after that is when I began to understand the Father and Son truth. And my training as a gospel worker really started to kick in then. And instead of just a still small voice, saying raise up churches, now it was a loud, burning desire to start raising up churches that stood on the fundamental principles instead of the fundamental beliefs, 27 or 28, because there are several errors in that. And I was working had three contracts in the oil field. So I was doing, raising the church on a volunteer basis to begin with. And about that time, 6 of us got together and decided to start Pioneer Publications, because there wasn't another ministry that was really bringing in all aspects of the gospel and how to reach the world and so on and so forth. And Pioneer Publications had a very powerful mission and vision statement. And it was wonderful because we were all on fire and we were really pressing towards the mark, really wanting to get the gospel out there. And Pioneer Publications later became Pioneer Health and Missions. When I was being a part of Pioneer Health and Missions, I was the first missions coordinator, and then I later became events coordinator. So I coordinated speaking events where multiple people would speak, and lining up the places, and lining up the speakers and so on. And then at the end of working with PHM, I was the ministerial director.
My name is Jason Hernberg. I've been working with PHM for approximately 2 years now. I started as a radio production manager, part-time for Revelation Radio. Shortly after that, I was transitioned into full-time work, where I was given the position of media coordinator, as well as technical administrator. And then about the last 8 months, now I've been a member of the PHM board as chairperson.
My name is Vasko, Belovski, and I was part of PHM for over a year and a half. As I look back over the past 5 years, I can most certainly testify of the Lord's leading in my life. And joining PHM was most certainly part of that. Actually, ministry began for me before I was even aware of the truth about God and His Son. I served as a head deacon and was actively involved in a new church plant in the city of Ottawa. And I was also part of an Adventist organization whose purpose was to inspire and involve Adventist youth in various local and international community projects. I still cherish the time I spent in Honduras and Belize. And in fact, I had an opportunity and desire to continue my work in these regions on a full-time basis. But the Lord miraculously closed the door, and I now understand why He did that. It was because soon after all of those things transpired in my life, I was introduced to the Father and Son truth. To make a long story short, the Lord led me and my wife to embrace the truth about God. And I began to share and invite people for biblical studies on the subject. We stayed active in church until we were not welcome to share anything anymore. And it was at that time when the Lord spoke clearly to me and said, the time has come for you to leave, to separate from error and continue to lead others to the truth. As a result of that, we opened our home and started a home church, which slowly grew. We were also able to have studies with a few other people in other cities where we had family and friends, which led to a couple more home groups being formed. I was more and more involved with speaking and sharing materials, doing work online under a personal ministry. But as my involvement in the work grew, I learned, or I realized that in unity there's strength. I looked at the apostles and I saw that they were not independent atoms, and we were not to be independent atoms. The apostles were not running their own individual ministries, but were working together to help the growth of the church. I began to pray for the Lord to open a door for me to work with others, and ultimately, this is how I arrived at PHM, which was one of the few ministries that was upholding not only the Father and Son truth, but was trying to uphold the other fundamental teachings that God has revealed in His Word, and which were to be part of God's last day movement.
So why did I leave PHM? There's a lot involved in why I left PHM, but I think if I were to sum it up into the most, the simplest way of putting it, and the most concise and powerful, PHM lost its mission and vision.
I left PHM because I desire to work at a ministry where I can be open and honest to those in the ministry and to those that support the ministry. People will sometimes have questions about a ministry. I want to have the freedom of giving those people open and honest answers if I work at that ministry.
In short, I left PHM because currently PHM is no longer willing to continue embracing all the biblical principles that God has revealed in His Word, and which were part of the first 50 years of the true Last Day Church.
PHM lost its mission and vision, and it became a bureaucracy. And a bureaucracy's number one job is to maintain power and even gain power, and its second job is to do that which it was set up to do. And in this case, that was spread the gospel. So when it becomes a bureaucracy, politics automatically get involved, and politics become the standard by which everything operates instead of the Word of God at that point.
Have you heard about undercurrents? Well, undercurrents are a current of water below the surface and moving in a different direction from any surface current. So you have this. Well, relationships can have undercurrents as well. An undercurrent in a relationship is an underlying feeling or influence, especially one contrary to the prevailing atmosphere, and is not expressed openly. An undercurrent. Undercurrents have been a major reason why I made a decision to leave. Experience has shown me that undercurrents are like a mold in a house. You don't necessarily see it on the surface, but it has the potential to ruin a house. Matthew 5:37 says, "But let your communication be yea, yea, nay, nay, for whatsoever is more than these cometh of evil." And another thing, it's very inefficient to work in a ministry with undercurrents. It can sometimes be impossible to go forward when they're held on to.
There's currently an improper understanding of gospel order and what it truly means to build God's church from the ground up, where both the ministers and the elders of the local churches come together and cooperate with each other.
We did not see eye to eye on how things should be organized as well. There were those of us like Vasko, myself, and Jason, that we saw that the delegates were to be the ones that provided the overview of how the church was to operate and function, the broad view, and then the executive committee was to execute the will of the delegates on a daily basis, because not all delegates can be full-time. I mean, they've got jobs. So the executive committee operates on the day-to-day basis, but it's based upon the view of the delegates. Now, there's some within PHM that, as we started studying and coming forth more with organization, they had disagreements with that. And the fear was that if we hand everything over to delegates, everything could go awry. And I agree, that is a fear. That's a real solid fear, especially since every last one of us, we put everything into this ministry. And to just hand it over completely to a group of delegates could potentially be devastating. And I was told a couple of times, well, if we do that, we might as well just throw PHM away. And my response is, no. If we do it man's way, it's guaranteed to fail. But if we do it God's way, there's a chance of failure, but there's a chance of success. So the only way to have a chance of success is to do it God's way, and not to have the executive committee as an oligarchy. So you've got a dictatorship where one individual rules, or kingly rule, but then you've also got, instead of one person, you've got a small group of people ruling, which is called an oligarchy. And that's what some wanted with the executive committee. They wanted that to rule. And the delegates would really only be a means of communication between the executive committee and the churches. But with the delegates, it's not just the delegates voting on things, it's also the ministers voting on things, because the ministers are automatically a part of this delegate system. But not everybody in the executive committee are ministers, and so therefore there would potentially be a loss of control, and that was a big problem.
There's something fundamental we as believers need to understand. The purpose of a ministry, or a minister for that matter, should be to preach the gospel and bring people to Christ and to his bride, the church. No ministry nor PHM ever was the church or will ever be the church. The church is the people, and while they are to be organized and to follow gospel order, we are to ever keep before us the fact that the people of God are what constitute the church, not one particular ministry or one particular minister. But coming back to PHM, over the past year or so, almost all who have left PHM and most of those who are still in PHM have failed to relinquish cherished ideas that are not in line with the Word of God, and which the Lord has been bringing to our attention for a reason. The process of reformation is never to stop. I'm constantly reminded of Ellen White's vision. If we as the people of God want to continue forward, we have to let go of whatever baggage we have on our backs that is preventing us from moving forward. But unfortunately, PHM has not continued to do that.
Transparency is quite big on my value list, and I desire to be a part of a ministry that supports this value. Another reason is because of leadership. I know in many ministries, there's internal conflict, but there was a resistance in leadership to even open and honest communication. We came to a standstill in overcoming the challenges. The distance increased, communication lessened, and it got to the point that I was impressed with the need to leave.
There's currently lack of transparency in PHM. For example, if you're to open a Review and Herald from the time of the pioneers, you will see an end-of-year financial statement posted every year in the Review that shows the people of God what those who've received their donations have done in the course of that year. Yet we don't see that being practiced not just in PHM alone, but by all the other ministries as well. There needs to be accountability and transparency on all levels, and the Lord wants to see that as part of His work. Also, dealings with workers at PHM do not follow biblical principle. For example, if someone is in error, they need to be disciplined according to what the Bible has revealed, and things are not to be swept under the carpet, nor worked from underneath to get a party to be silenced or to leave. A lot of damage, I believe, has been done because PHM has failed to communicate openly with the people, and I can't support that.
Transparency was another big issue. There were several of us that were pushing for greater transparency. Transparency is being open and having everything, having things visible to the people. But if you're not transparent, you're closing things off so that you can't see behind closed doors. And that means you're hiding something. And if you're hiding something, you don't hide good, you don't hide truth, you hide error. And so we were pushing that there be transparency to the people that are funding PHM. Because really those people that are funding PHM, they're funding it with God's money, and they are held accountable before God for sending that funding to the right place for the right reasons and things being done correctly with it. And so we were wanting that things be more open, and there was a push, but then some things started to become a little more open, but then it just kind of shut down again. And so that became a real issue where we couldn't answer questions. People would ask us, what happened with Daniel? What happened with this or with that? And all too often we would have to say, I can't answer that right now. And we just feel that was wrong, that we need to be able to be open to the people so that they can hold us accountable because God holds them accountable, and also so that they can decide, is this where they want to send God's money? Is this where they want to put their time into helping this organization? Do they know the problems that are going on within PHM? And the ultimate answer is no. People have suspicions, but they really don't know these things that have been going on. And so, I'm bringing these things out not because I'm trying to bash PHM or because I'm trying to bash anyone in PHM, but because people have a right to know, because God is holding them accountable for what's been going on, even though they don't know. And it's time that people know some of the things that have been going on and where PHM is now.
There are also two doctrinal ideas that are currently cherished by some in PHM and by those who have left PHM that aren't biblical.
We didn't all agree on the flat world theory, as Ellen White calls it, and we did not all see eye to eye on the divine nature of Christ. Now, the flat world theory, I don't believe it shouldn't be a huge issue, but because it had affected several of our missions, it became an issue because we weren't allowed to speak on it because we weren't unified on it. And that was an agreement that we had, and I agree with that agreement, but the problem is we just couldn't get unified on it. And the more I studied the divine nature of Christ, the more I started realizing that's a big deal. That's a really big deal. And I brought it forth for over 2 years in PHM, trying to open up discussion on it to really no avail.
There are a lot of unbiblical ideas in the non-Trinitarian movement as a whole, which have been hurting the cause of God, but these will be discussed in upcoming presentations so that every believer can have the opportunity to choose between truth and error. I firmly believe that the Spirit of God will work mightily, not necessarily in numbers, but in the hearts of all, and ultimately the final result will be perfect unity in spirit and in truth, as the Bible says. So these are the primary reasons as to why I resigned from PHM, and I look at that as a step forward in the cause of God.
Why did Daniel and Alan leave PHM? I can't really speak. I've spoken with both Daniel and Alan, obviously a lot while they were at PHM, but even after they left PHM, and I've asked them these questions, and when it comes to Alan, I will just simply refer people back to Alan, to talk to Alan. I don't have permission from Alan to talk about what we had talked about. All I can really say is that Alan had good reasons to leave PHM. And the same goes with Daniel. I've talked to Daniel, and I'm not going to tell everybody what Daniel told me personally in confidence. But I do want to touch on some things that I think are very important. Not what Daniel told me, but what I saw, what I found out I remember I mentioned that PHM had become a bureaucracy, and that was the ruling thing in the standard of how to deal with people was politics instead of the Bible. And I had some issues with Daniel and his theology. Several of us did, with the divine nature of Christ. And there were some other issues that had arisen, which when I talked to Daniel later, he explained to me, and now I understand why some of these things were happening. But the big picture is Daniel was not dealt with correctly. He was not dealt with in a biblical manner. It took me a while before I figured that out, started piecing the pieces of the puzzle together. And I have to say, I should have spoke up when I learned that. And for that, I'm very sorry that I didn't. At the time, I was already becoming known as the problem maker, because I was pointing out all these issues. This is a problem. We can't do this. We need to do this. This is what the Bible says. What Ellen White says. This is pioneers, so on and so forth. We shouldn't operate this way. We need to change. And so I was constantly bringing up issues. And when this finally came to me with Daniel had already been gone, and so I didn't raise my voice, and I should have. Why did Bill Cave leave PHM? There's a lot of rumors surrounding why Bill left PHM. One, I'm sure I haven't heard them all, but one is that I fired Bill, which I didn't have the authority to fire Bill. I wasn't on the board, and at that time I wasn't the ministerial director. There were some issues with Bill and his character, though, and I confronted Bill with these issues. These were major issues. Now, Bill was fired at one point, not by me, but by Jason Ash. Bill had broken one of our agreements to not talk about the flat world theory. And so he was talking about the flat world theory, and Jason found out about it, and they had a bit of a, shall we say, disagreement in the mission. And so Jason fired him, and later the board reversed that. There was only one person on the board that actually stood for the correct side of that. But he wasn't fired over the flat world theory. He wasn't even fired. He resigned, and I encourage people to ask for his resignation letter. He resigned of his own accord. I didn't fire him. He wasn't actually fired by anybody. But there were some backstory issues that were going on. And I'd raised issues with Bill and his character issues. And I'd asked everybody in PHM, all but one person, I asked, is Bill fit for being a minister? Every single person I asked, without hesitation, said absolutely not. Except for one person. I asked him 3 times and he wouldn't answer the question because he knew what the answer was. But the reason I was given for keeping Bill on instead of dealing with him in a biblical manner was because, well, Daniel had left, Alan had left, and if we fire Bill, that's going to create controversy and our numbers are going to drop. It was about numbers, not about whether somebody's qualified as a minister. So he actually ended up resigning of his own accord, and there was another rumor that we left him homeless. Well, that's not true either, because before he even started with PHM, he had the intent of selling his house. And at this time, from what I understand, I wasn't a part of the board, so I didn't actually talk with Bill on this, but I was told that somebody from the board told Bill, look, don't sell your house right now. And he went ahead and sold his house anyways. And then he resigned of his own accord. So I wasn't the one that fired him. Bill quit on his own. There were some backstory political issues going on that actually overruled the biblical issues, which is where I have the problem with. But Bill could have stayed on as a quote-unquote minister, or as he was labeled, as an evangelist, and taken the pay cut. We all took pay cuts. PHM was going through some financial turbulence at that time. And at one point, there were several of us that volunteered, and I'm not sure how many, but I know I was working for no pay there for a time because PHM didn't have a whole lot of money. And so these were some of the things that we brought out that needed to be transparent as well, so that people could know this. But it was said, no, we don't want anybody to know that the PHM was having problems. So yeah, Bill could have stayed on. I didn't have authority to say he wasn't a minister, so he definitely could have stayed on working with PHM in that capacity if he so chose. Why are ministries not working together? This is a really good question, and this is a question I've heard a lot, and I think this is a good time to kind of answer this from my perspective, having worked within PHM and worked with other ministries trying to bring ministries together for the bigger picture.
Well, some ministries are working together. In fact, we ourselves are in contact with other ministers and ministries that we plan to work with. But all ministries will never work together for as long as people hold on to unbiblical principles. That is really the core reason why we haven't seen all the non-Trinitarian ministries work as one.
One that I have seen is finances. There's some ministries out there that they make a lot of money. And they don't want to relinquish that money. Some don't want to relinquish, they don't want to work with another ministry because they will be sharing power, and they don't want to do that. A lot of people are just plain independent atoms. They don't want to work with anybody, period. They want to do it their own way, their own style, and do it as they please, when they please, and not be accountable to anybody. That's a huge issue. Probably the ultimate core issue. But there are also legitimate reasons why ministries don't work together. Theological issues.
I believe many people will actually be encouraged by what has been happening in the non-Trinitarian movement because it has been foretold. The time has come for people to realize that God's true movement was started in the mid-1800s, and only those of us who are in line with the Bible are going to be part of that true movement. Believing in the truth about God is crucial and essential. It is, after all, the first and most important commandment. But Satan is very sly. It does not cover up other doctrinal lies, which in fact end up impacting the integrity of the Father and Son truth, such as the current confusion on all these different subjects that we see being preached by various ministries in the movement. Truth is a perfect chain made up of many links, and each one must be strong and true for the chain to hold. Therefore, this truth is a major piece of the puzzle, but it's not a blanket that covers up other falsehoods, which have no place among the true remnant. We currently have different non-Trinitarian groups and movements, but not all of them are really part of the remnant, because all of these errors were never part of the remnant and are never going to be part of the remnant.
And also spirit issues. So some ministries just are not of the same spirit. So in order to move forward in power, not by might nor by power, but by God's Spirit, is what he tells us, you not only need to be, you need to have the Spirit, which is the Spirit of truth. So you need to be working in unity and truth and in spirit with one another. And so if you don't have either one of those, then those are a real legitimate reason not to work with another ministry. And that's part of why I'm not working with PHM anymore, is because we weren't of the same truth. There were doctrinal issues, and we weren't of the same spirit. But the Seventh-day Press, we're open to working with others as long as they're of the same spirit and have the same spirit and have the truth. We don't want to hold power. We could have been a majority vote within PHM and forced things to change. But then we would still not have been working forward with the Spirit of God, even though there would have been a majority vote and we would have been going the right direction. But without the Spirit of God, it's not going to get done. And that's really, really important. So yeah, we are open with working with other groups and individuals. In fact, we're asking for help from groups and individuals that are in unity and spirit and in truth so that we can all work together and move forward in spreading the gospel. This isn't about control. This isn't about bureaucracy. This is about spreading the gospel so that Jesus can come.
What's next for those of us joining together to form 7-Day Press is that which has always been our goal. As I mentioned earlier, ministries aren't the church. They're to support the church, and 7-Day Press desires to work for the church, not trying to be the church. We have an earnest desire to continue rebuilding God's church by working closely with those who are on the same page as us, which is to be the pages of the Bible, of course, the truth that the Bible has revealed and the principles that have been given to us to follow.
Seventh-day Press the name represents, of course, seventh day, like Seventh-day Adventist, but press is not printing press, which we hope that will be a part of, the future, which I'll talk about in a minute, but press is pressing together to reach the mark for the goal. It's not about us. We're wanting everyone to press together to reach the goal and spreading the three angels' messages to the world.
We'll keep on preaching all the truth that is found in the Bible. We'll continue training, raising, and supporting groups in every way we can. We'll continue publishing. And most importantly, we want Christ to be our head. We want His Spirit leading all that we do.
We let the Lord build the house. What does that house look like? It's more than the external structure. It's more than a form. It's more than paperwork. It's also the people. And the people is you and me. When the Lord builds the house, what do we see? We see character development taking place. And once again, that character development happens not only to you, but it also happens to the leaders as well. And I think that is neglected a lot. And that is what the Lord is trying to build. Not just external, not just the form, but also internal as well. Psalm 127 says, "Except the Lord build the house, they labor in vain that build it." Seventh-day Press looks to move forward with good communication. It includes transparency, openness, and honesty. And by the grace of God, churches will be established, the gospel will be preached, the three angels' messages will be proclaimed with power, souls will be saved, and by God's grace, God's people will be standing under the banner of Prince Emmanuel.
Our mission is to bring the everlasting gospel to the whole world, not in word and deed, not just in word only. So we're not just preaching it, but in deed also. So we're living it, not just preaching it. So in word and deed, while warning of the dangers of Babylon and the beast. And our vision is, which is something that is down the road, something that we're looking at to focus on. Our vision is to hasten the soon coming of Christ by preparing a people to stand in that day. That's a big vision. The three angels' messages are all enveloping in that. And that's a big vision. So, how do we plan to do that? Well, if you look in the Bible, everybody that was converted and working for God really had two ministries, if you will. A two-pronged approach to ministry. One is a ministry to the church, and then the other one is a ministry to the world. You see, Paul and Peter both had the same thing. They had two different ministries, one to the Jew and one to the Gentile. They had one primary, but the other was still there. And so with us, our ministry to the church, for example, is things like Sabbath services. We want to continue holding Sabbath services, including on Zoom for those that may not have a local church yet. They want a body of believers to worship with. So we will continue holding Zoom meetings, Zoom services, along with local services. Trainings in the cycle of evangelism, because church is not just about some place where you come to warm a pew and get fed. The primary focus of church is, number one, to be a training center for the spreading of the gospel, to train the people to go out to the world and to be a support group, if you will. I don't like that word, but I think people know what I mean. to be a support for you in going out to the world to spread the three angels' messages to the world in an evangelistic cycle. But it's also to be held accountable with one another. We don't just want to train people and preach, but we want to actually lead active outreach. More than just preaching on videos, and putting out videos and telling others how to do it, but actually there on the ground leading some of these things. Now, obviously, we can't be everywhere at once, but raising up churches where we're at and training those churches and helping others to do the same. Also, a part of the ministry to the church is going to be doctrinal teachings. We are called to be the watchmen on the wall. We're not to be dumb dogs that are silent when error is coming in. So we will put forth videos that are pointing out error and showing truth with doctrinal teachings. Country living. Our mission to the church is trainings in that, along with health trainings. Health is the right hand of the gospel. And not only do we need to know how to present it and to help people that are sick, but we ourselves need to be acting it and living it so that we have the clear minds to hear that still small voice. Ministry to the world is also there. We don't want to just be one of those ministries that just ministers to the church. We want to go beyond that, because we're called to go ye into all the world, not just the church, to all the world. And so we're also going to include that as the second-pronged approach, if you will, through friendship evangelism, one-on-one Bible studies, group studies, health evangelism, evangelistic reaping meetings, baptisms. And by the way, evangelistic reaping meetings are a part of a system. We don't want to just do evangelistic meetings. We want to do the whole system, because that's important. The whole system. Evangelistic meetings is not evangelism. That's not in the whole scope of evangelism. That's just one part of evangelism. And when people are baptized, then they come into the church, they've been converted, they come into the church. Well, then they are trained to then go out to the world to spread the gospel. So that's a lot. The two-pronged approach, one to the church and one to the world, that's a lot to contemplate, and that's a lot to do. And we can't do that all at once, boom, like that. We have to take this in phases. So, phase one is, raising awareness and support of the body of Christ. We want people to unite with us in spirit and in truth. If they're going to unite with us in spirit and in truth, they need to know the truths that we stand on. So we will begin by putting out videos like this so people can know if they want to be a part of Seventh-day Press. We need that support base. Again, not just financial support base, but that support base of unity, working with others, so that we can build that base and then go out to the world. So we have to start and work in phases. So phase number one is really raising awareness. And something else we would like to do is raise money for a base of operations to be used as a local church. It can also be an outpost, a video location, place for health evangelism, evangelistic series, camp meetings, so on and so forth. And grow outward with that, because we need that base to start with, to stand on and go outward. And always ever keeping our goals and progress ever before the people. We want transparency in what we're doing, where we're at, how things are going, what our goals are, finances, where money is going, so on and so forth, so that people can make educated decisions. Do they want to support this? Would God be pleased with them being a part of Seventh-day Press and being a part of what we're doing and hiding nothing? We don't want to be in the shadows and behind closed doors or behind we want to be more transparent than what I refer to a bank vault. We don't want to be the bank vault that you can't see anything in. We want to be open and transparent. And so, ever keeping our goals and progress before the people. So that's phase one, building that foundation, building that base to be able to work with and move out. So primarily that's going to be aimed at the body of believers. Then we will be able to start stepping into phase two, which is going out into the world, aiming at the world. We would like to have a second website that is specific to the world, so that when people can comfortably share a video or material with somebody with the name on it, and they go to the site and they don't see Ellen White this, Ellen White that, and they're like, well, who is Ellen White? It's user-friendly for the world so that they can be able to go through truths systematically. We would also like to have printed materials that people can hand out. Bible studies. We want to put together Bible studies, good Bible studies that hold truth in them, that as a resource for the church to be able to hand out to people and to do those one-on-one Bible studies with others. So those are the two phases that are important. And so, we want to be upfront with people that we can't just logistically jump right into going to the world. We have to do this in phases. We've got goals, we've got plans, we've got objectives. We're not just haphazardly jumping into this and blindly going forward in the dark. God's given us light as to how we should do these things, and this is important, and it's exciting because we've got a good, strong, powerful mission and vision. We're working in truth and in spirit together, and with that, God can empower us with His Spirit so that the end can be brought sooner, so that Jesus can come sooner, so that we can get the message spread to all the world. And we're not going to do it by ourselves. We need help. We want people out there that are united with us in spirit and in truth, working with us to do these things. This is exciting. This is very exciting to me. This is very powerful, and I'm shaking with anticipation to see God work as we move forward.